I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. We begin in Venezuela, where an uprising's underway with opposition leader Juan Guaido saying that troops have joined him as they attempt to oust President Nicolas Maduro. Now, these pictures are coming in showing hundreds of people on the streets waving flags and throwing objects at military vehicles, with police responding with tear gas. The government responding, saying it's deactivating an attempted coup by what it's calling a group of treacherous soldiers. The US also throwing its support behind Guaido, who's saying there's no turning back as he tries to claim legitimate power.
Now I call on the civil servants, who are a fundamental component, not only for the transition, but also for the reconstruction of Venezuela, to recover national sovereignty. Our armed forces today, courageous soldiers, courageous patriots, courageous men who follow the Constitution, have responded to our call. We have come together in the streets of Venezuela. Today, as the president in charge of Venezuela, the legitimate commander-in-chief of the armed forces, I call on all soldiers in the military family to accompany us within the framework of the Constitution, in the framework of nonviolent struggle that we have carried out all along.
Now, all of this as the United Nations is calling for calm in Venezuela, with its Secretary General Antonio Guterres urging maximum restraint in the Latin American country. Guterres telling reporters that he's there to mediate the situation if required.
The Secretary General is following very closely and with concern the latest developments in Venezuela. The situation is unfolding as we speak. We are also, the United Nations is also reaching out to the parties. The Secretary General urges all sides to exercise maximum restraint, and he appeals to all stakeholders to avoid any violence and take immediate steps to restore calm.
And for more on this developing situation in Venezuela, I'm joined on Skype by Gabriel Chokran, who's the Executive Director at Aurora News, which is Israel's leading Spanish-language publication. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining me. Firstly, tell me, opposition leader Guaido appeared in a 3-minute video standing alongside well-known opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez, who's been under house arrest by Maduro's government for inciting violence during anti-government protests in 2014. So how significant is his release?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, his release is really important because he was guarded by militaries that were at his house 24 hours a day. So the release of Leopoldo Lopez already says that there is an important group of militaries that are against the government of Maduro. And on the other hand, also Leopoldo Lopez has been throughout the years one of the main leaders of the opposition. Many say he's going to be the next president of Venezuela after this regime ends. And this really is a very good signal, a very positive signal for the opposition in Venezuela, that things are starting to align to make a new change.
Gabriel, the National Army is a key player here, with both Maduro and Guaido claiming that they have control over the military. So tell me, which side's it on?
That's a really great question that now nobody has the answer to. Maybe Guaido or Maduro has them. But the militaries are starting to go against Maduro. We are still waiting to see what is going to be the position of Padrino Lopez, the head of the army of Venezuela. But until now, we know of a little group of Venezuelan military that is supporting Guaido. But Guaido is saying that most of the militaries are already supporting him, but are not going out in public for him. There's also a lot of information that's being controlled by the government of Venezuela. They are blocking the social media in the country. They're trying to keep this as controlled as possible. Maduro is saying all the time that the military already confirmed they're going to be loyal to him. But the truth is, the spirit, the environment today in Venezuela, it's starting to feel different. People are starting to believe that the change is really going to come on the next hours. And we'll have to see now. We already saw images of militaries that support Guaido that already are taking control of some of the most important bases in Venezuela. Civilian people are going to those bases also to support the military and to support Guaido's leadership. And the next hours will be really key in this whole process.
Yes, it certainly will be. And very dramatic pictures we are seeing coming in of people throwing rocks at army vehicles, throwing rocks over freeways. So regarding these people, tell me, who are they really supporting and what can we expect going forward?
People that are going now on the streets are supporting the government of Juan Guaidó. They are starting to go to show the military how they have the support of the entire people, but also because of the military going against Maduro. Maduro is also taking out what he calls his colectivos, the collective. There is a paramilitary group in Venezuela that are armed, and they're trying to threaten all the civilian people of Venezuela that are supporting Guaidó. And there have been reports that they are going to the protest in Caracas and in other places of the country to violently try to suppress this protest, and there are really starting to be a lot of violence between the sides.
Okay, Gabriel Chocron, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and let's hope.
And for more on this story, let's now go to our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv, who is standing by in D.C. Dan, thank you. Tell me, what's the U.S. government saying about these unfolding events in Venezuela?
Sarah, reporting from New York today, by the way, and the United States government is clearly taking sides, saying that Juan Guaidó is the legitimate president of Venezuela. Therefore, people like Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, a big supporter of Guaidó, he says this is not a coup d'etat. This is the legitimate president rallying to his side members of the armed forces. We also have a tweet. It's from the Vice President, Mike Pence, that says, to Juan Guaidó, the National Assembly, and all the freedom-loving people of Venezuela who are taking to the streets today, again, clearly taking sides. It says, estamos con ustedes. We are with you. America will stand with you until freedom and democracy are restored. And Vice President Pence ends with another Spanish phrase, vayan con Dios, go with God. So clearly the U.S. wants Guaidó to win, and this seems to be the big day, Sarah.
Dan, tell me, behind the scenes, are there any signs that the United States may have helped to organise what's looking like a coup?
Well, Venezuela has been a big topic for the Trump administration for well over a year, and it's been understood that, of course, United States intelligence agencies would be part of what's going on. And there is U.S. military in a neighboring country, Colombia. There has been for a long time, mainly on anti-drug smuggling efforts. So there's every likelihood that at least the CIA is monitoring what's happening. But considering that President Trump and Vice President Pence and others in the administration really want Nicolás Maduro to be overthrown, you have to believe the CIA is involved somehow, but it's one of those things we may not know for years, Sarah.
That's right, Dan. And tell me, what can the U.S. actually do to lend support to Juan Guaidó?
Well, there have been increasingly harsh sanctions on the Maduro regime month after month. The U.S. was clearly saying that it wants Maduro to go, that he's an illegitimate leader in Venezuela. So we can expect harsher sanctions or more enforcement, absolutely no money getting into Venezuela, and the possibility that even aid, including food, would only go to, shall we call them, rebels, and certainly not to anyone who might be on Maduro's side. That's the kind of thing we expect as these days go on, if this effort to get rid of Maduro takes even longer than one day. So I would underline sanctions. The Trump administration has said all options are on the table, so they haven't said that U.S. forces being involved is impossible. It just isn't expected, at least not out in the open, Sarah.
And Dan, just fairly briefly, we only have just less than a minute left. What sort of reaction to all of this are we hearing from the international community?
Well, yeah, it's really quite astonishing that in the past 6 months and more, an increasing number of nations, in fact, recognize Juan Guaidó, who claimed to be the legitimate president, as just that. Those nations include Great Britain and Israel and many others, not just the United States. So there really was an effort here to get rid of Maduro, and many countries recognize what President Trump and his advisors have said, that there are 3 nations in this hemisphere that are considered socialist: Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. And the Trump Trump administration wants that number to go down to zero nations that are socialist, as the White House puts it, Sarah.
Dan Raviv, thank you. We're going out for a short break. Stay with us.